The title of this lecture is Augustine and the Christian Commonwealth. In this lecture, we will explore the emergence of an idea that formed the nucleus of medieval Christendom, the idea of a Christian Commonwealth. We will approach this first by examining the Christianization of the Roman Commonwealth through two Christian emperors. Second, we will examine the collapse of Roman imperial authority in the West. And third, we will explore St. Augustine's idea of a Christian Commonwealth. The two emperors we will be looking at are Constantine and Theodosius. Constantine was a military commander in Roman Britain in the 4th century. He was proclaimed Augustus, senior emperor for the Western Empire by his troops in 306 in the city of York, in what is today northern England. In 311, Constantine marched on Rome to challenge Maxentius, a usurper who held the city. The two armies clashed at the Battle of Milvian Bridge outside Rome. On the eve of the battle, Constantine reportedly saw a vision in the sky of the Chi Rho, pictured here. Chi and Rho are the first two Greek letters in the name of Christ, or Christos in Greek. Under the symbol was the Latin inscription, In hoc signo vinces, under this sign you will conquer. Constantine had the Chi Rho symbol painted on the shields of his soldiers. At the battle the next day, he prevailed and became emperor in the West. 2 years later, after assuming the imperial title, Constantine, along with the Eastern Emperor Licinius, issued the Edict of Milan, granting legal toleration to Christians and officially ending the persecutions. It is important to note, however, that Constantine did not make Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. Paganism still retained its official status under his rule, even though Constantine himself favored the church and was baptized on his deathbed. Catholic Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire under Emperor Theodosius, who in 380 issued the Edict of Thessalonica. Thus, Rome had become a Christian empire. Despite Christianity becoming the official religion of the empire, however, Roman authority disintegrated in Western Europe. Why did this happen? This is a very complex question, which we do not have time to go into in any real depth. Two problems, however, help explain the military and political disintegration of the Western Empire in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th centuries. First, there was the challenge of maintaining centralized control over such a large empire. While Diocletian had attempted to remedy this by dividing the empire into two halves, an Eastern and a Western empire, each with its own senior and junior emperor, a system which continued into the 4th and 5th centuries. Nevertheless, maintaining stability and order over such a vast area proved to be a Herculean and ultimately impossible task. This problem was exacerbated by fighting among various military commanders, each vying for a position of absolute power within the empire. It is in this context that we must understand the coming of the barbarians. The word barbarian is derived from the Greek word barbaros, meaning foreigner. Since these foreigners were not part of the Roman way of life, the word carried the connotation of being uncivilized. The barbarians were various northern European peoples who settled in the empire in the 4th and 5th centuries. These included the Goths, the Celts, the Vandals, the Suevi, the Alemanni, and the Franks. It is also important to recognize that the barbarian peoples did not come as invaders or marauders. They were pushed southward and westward by the Huns, who invaded Central Europe from the steppes of Asia. These barbarian peoples settled in various underpopulated areas of the Western Empire and were soon recruited by the Romans to serve in the army, either as full members of Roman legions or as auxiliary, that is, mercenary forces. One of these barbarian commanders of auxiliary troops was Alaric the Visigoth. The word Visigoth simply means Western Goth. His army of Goth barbarians had been hired to defend the empire. Alaric, being an ambitious general, sought to rise in the ranks of the Roman army to a more prominent position. He also had been repeatedly promised by the emperor land for his troops. This land was never forthcoming. So finally, in 408, he turned on the Romans and began raiding towns and estates in Italy. The one Roman commander who was in a position to stop Alaric was Flavius Stilicho. Stilicho was half Roman, half Vandal, and had risen in the ranks of the military to become the commander of the Roman army in Italy. He was a very able commander, and his troops were fiercely loyal to him. In 408, however, in unbelievably poor timing and judgment, Emperor Honorius, fearing Stilicho's popularity and power, had him murdered. In response, Stilicho's troops refused to fight. Alaric now had an open road to Rome, and his army sacked the city in 410. Thus the city of Rome, the eternal city and traditional capital of the empire, was subjected to a catastrophe that shook the entire Roman world. Now we turn to St. Augustine, whose thought in regard to this tragic event we will presently consider. He was born in Tagaste, North Africa. He was the son of a pagan father and a Christian mother, St. Monica. He received a classical Roman education centered on rhetoric. He became a Christian at age 30 and soon became a priest, and eventually became bishop of the city of Hippo in North Africa, a post he held until his death in 430. The details of his early life and conversion are powerfully conveyed in his autobiography, The Confessions. Augustine has left us an immense literary corpus, dealing with many and various theological and spiritual topics. His most important work, in terms of its impact on Western culture, is his City of God. The work was written in the wake of Alaric's sack of Rome in 410. Augustine intended it as a defense against pagan accusations that Christians were responsible for the catastrophe. How could the Christians be held responsible? Because, in the opinion of the pagans, Rome had abandoned the worship of the pagan gods, and now these same gods were punishing the Roman people. Central to Augustine's defense of the Christians is his theology of history, which he develops in the work. According to Augustine, human history is the story of two metaphorical cities, the city of earth and the city of God. The city of earth is composed of the mass of unredeemed humanity throughout history, personified at the very beginning of history in the person of Cain, who murdered his brother Abel out of jealousy, as recorded in the book of Genesis. This city, the city of earth, true to the character of Cain, is motivated by love of self to the point of contempt for God. The city of God, conversely, consists of the redeemed throughout history. It is personified by Abel, the younger brother of Cain, who offered an acceptable sacrifice to God and whom Cain murdered. True to the nature of Abel, this city is motivated by love of God to the point of contempt for self. Only by loving God can a commonwealth experience that concord necessary for its well-being and survival, argues Augustine. Why? Because love for God counteracts our sinful, disordered preoccupation with self. It is important to bear in mind that Augustine is speaking metaphorically here. The metaphor of the two cities is his way of making sense out of the complexities of history, with its triumphs and tragedies. The two cities are intermingled throughout human history and will be separated at the end of time on the day of judgment. The model of the two cities is Augustine's way of making sense out of the catastrophes that befell the Roman Commonwealth. In regard to the Commonwealth, Augustine uses Cicero's definition. Remember from an earlier lecture, according to Cicero, a commonwealth is the concern of a people. This can also mean well-being of the people, which is how Augustine uses the term. And again, following Cicero, a people is an assemblage of some size associated with one another through agreement on law and community of interest. According to Cicero, justice is essential for the preservation of any commonwealth, for it safeguards social concord and peace. Augustine quotes Cicero in this connection. In the case of music for strings or wind, and in vocal music, there is a certain harmony to be kept between the different parts. And if this is altered or disorganized, the cultivated ear finds it intolerable. The united efforts of dissimilar voices are blended into harmony by the exercise of restraint. In the same way, a community of different classes, high, low, and middle, unites, like the varying sounds of music, to form a harmony of very different parts through the exercise of rational restraint. And what is called harmony in music answers to concord in community. This is the best and closest bond of security in a country, and this cannot possibly exist without justice. By Cicero's own admission, Augustine argues, the Roman Commonwealth abandoned justice and thereby ceased to exist. Again, he quotes Cicero. Before our own period, the traditional moral code produced outstanding men, and these excellent men preserved the code and the practices of their forebears. Whereas our age has received the Commonwealth like a magnificent picture which has almost faded away with age, and it is not only omitted to restore it with the original colors, it has not even taken the trouble to preserve what one may call the general shape and the bare outlines. For what remains of that ancient morality which, according to the poet, supported the Roman state? We see that it has passed out of use into oblivion, so that far from being cultivated, it does not even enter our minds. And what about the men? Morality has passed away through the lack of the men, and we are bound to be called to account for this disaster. And even one may say to defend ourselves on a capital charge. For we retain the name of Commonwealth, but we have lost the reality long ago. And this was not through any misfortune, but through our own misdemeanors. In light of this, Augustine maintains that Rome never was a true commonwealth, because it lacked justice. To the extent that it was a commonwealth, it was destroyed from within by moral corruption, not because the Romans had forsaken the Roman gods. To this he contrasts the true commonwealth, which is the city of God. Augustine writes, I shall do my best to demonstrate that that commonwealth, namely the Roman Commonwealth, never existed, because there never was real justice in that community. Now, it certainly was a commonwealth to some degree, according to more plausible definitions, and it was better ruled by the Romans of antiquity than by their later successors. But true justice is found only in that commonwealth whose founder and ruler is Christ. If we agree to call it a commonwealth, seeing that we cannot deny that it is the weal of the community. However, if this title, so commonly used elsewhere with a different sense, may be too remote from our usual way of speaking, we may say that at least there is true justice in that city of which the Holy Scripture says, glorious things are said about you, O city of God. In conclusion, with the collapse of the Roman Empire in Western Europe and the theology of history provided by Augustine, the stage is set for the emergence of Christendom, a social, cultural, and political order founded upon and permeated by Christian faith and morals.